What's up, Sales RXers? You know that I have a very special place in my heart for the sales dev world. It's where I came up in when I first started managing people. It's where I got my first leadership stint. And I was always a really big proponent of top of funnel outreach. I love doing it even as an AE. I was always typically full cycle. And so I got a lot of experience generating my own opportunities. As a leader of sales dev teams, what I notice is that's typically a very hard role to lead people in because it's either their first job or their first job in tech sales or their first job in sales as a whole. And so you're teaching a lot of things for the first time. You got a lot of people that aren't sure if they still want to do the job, or maybe they want to move into marketing, or maybe they want to move into customer success or support or sales engineering, whatever it might be. So you really got to do a good job of identifying your top performers and where to spend your time on who you need to develop. Who's going to be your builder? Who's going to be your maintainer? Who are your departers that are really just there to complain and look at the grass on the other side of the fence? And that's why I'm really excited for the head of global sales development at Venafi, James Barton, who joined the podcast today. I met James at the 10 Bound conference last year in November. He delivered an incredible keynote on the topic, and we were able to get him on the podcast to share a little bit more about how managers can identify those top performers and their time spent when working with reps and their performance, especially in an economy where things are really tough right now. So without further ado, let's jump right in.
I think you touched on the big subject that's very relevant right now is downsizing because of the economy, because of the dollar getting so expensive, because of buyers not buying or stalling to the new year or even the second half of next year. The one thing that's really interesting is a lot of companies don't take a breath when they're trying to understand where to cut the fat, and they're hacking away at it with a scalpel versus, or a hacksaw versus a scalpel. And like, yes, you will always have bottom performers, but you also need to identify who those people are, why, and going into a slower period for this world we're in, desperately hold on to anybody that is a proven pipeline builder. It's something we're going through right now where we're actually about to do confidentially, and hopefully this won't be aired anytime soon. We're looking at reducing headcount. I've kind of gotten on my soapbox recently about the idea that the last role you want to get rid of are the pipeline builders. We've already proven that we are the strongest source of pipeline for the business. We're going to be around because of that pipeline we've generated. But if we want to get through the darkest times ahead, we need to have all hands on deck for that. So gone through this exercise recently of the talent that we have on the team, best I've ever seen, best I've ever been associated with by far. The last person you want to let go of is an SDR because they're cheap talent that the return on their investment is 4 or 5x, especially with our company.
Yeah.
So it's kind of touching upon the world I came from was HR tech, of identifying your top talent, making sure you have your succession plans in place, identifying who your top performers are, bottom performers are, the best of your abilities if you have the system set up that way. But for me, it's heartbreaking to know that some people that I work with and I love working with every day are going to be gone in the not too distant future. So
yeah, I mean that's really interesting, and maybe that's where we start. What I find really interesting, James, is you come from the HR world, so you have this background in scoping out top performers, bottom performers, understanding where reductions need to happen. And hey, it's just apparent that we're about to approach reductions in force across all tech companies. You've already seen it at bigger companies with project managers, operations people, but now we're starting to actually see it at a sales level, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we could talk about the what all day long, but how do you really identify who your top performers are as a sales leader? What are some of the key traits? And I say that because one of the concepts I personally like is Simon Sinek's concept of high performer, high trust versus medium performer, medium performer, high trust versus high performer, low trust. And how do you analyze those people? And his how is just you ask anybody who's the asshole in the room, and that's the person that you don't want on the team versus the medium performer of high trust. But how do you scope that out as someone who leads sales dev teams when you go, hey, these are my 80% that I have to hold on to. I can't do without these people.
So the first, I'll try to be as short as possible with this answer, but unfortunately it's going to be a longer one. I come from the HR tech world, my first stop in sales development and sales, and our number one rule was, excuse my language in advance, but the no asshole rule. So we don't have to have the assholes in the room, the concern about those guys. So the way I view sales development, like what good looks like, is in 3 buckets. One is the performance metrics. How are you doing on your goals? How are we measuring you time frame wise? Is it monthly, quarterly, etc.? How are you doing against those targets per month? Are you a consistent performer, right? Are you a medium high performer, medium low performer? So that's pretty much black and white, especially if you know the metrics. There are 2 buckets that those fall into of leading indicators and success metrics, right? The success metrics, what they get paid on, what the business counts on, but you know the predictability element of the leading indicators that lead to that. You can actually kind of do fortune telling or kind of have a crystal ball. Second bucket that we measure on, or I personally measure on, is the core competencies of the role and being a citizen of our company. Are you aligning to the values of the organization? Are you aligning to the values of our team? Are you aligned to the values of who we are as human beings? And if the record is good, there's nothing negative dinged on you in your HR profile, or things that we're concerned about, it's kind of like, unfortunately, it's kind of a warm and fuzzy kind of feely sort of scenario. The last one is culture. Culture is the X factor and kind of like the extra invisible manager on a sales development team. If you and I are sales development reps and I give more to the culture than take from it, I am not necessarily more higher liked or more popular, but more like people know they can come to me and I can pause, put some time in, reinvest back in the team, versus you don't do that. You're just heads down focusing on your targets and hitting those. That to me is the kind of the culture measurement, right? Are you a team player? Because once you get outside the sales development team, it's not a team dynamic anymore. It's a bunch of individual contributors, especially if you go into sales. Nobody cares about anything else other than what's immediately in front of them. So you kind of cross all 3 of those kind of realms together, so to speak, and it creates a reality of who your top talent is. Culture is the reason why people get out of bed on Monday mornings. No joke. People why they stay and don't want to leave. But also, you don't have to be the tip-top performer every month, every quarter, every year to be insanely valuable to your team and your organization. So that's kind of it's a full spectrum. It's not a quick and easy thing, and I do not look at data on surface level. I go deep behind the surface, or deep below the surface, to really understand what all of those look like.
Yeah, and I've always said patterns preach process, and process breeds performance. So if you see what the performance is, you work back to what they're doing, and then you see the patterns that are evolving, then you understand the behaviors of the person you have. You said something really interesting that's kind of a cool concept that you should trademark moving forward, but it's the invisible manager. That's really cool. I've never heard that before. Tell me, how do you identify, like you said, somebody that gives to the culture more than they take from it? What are some things that if I'm an SDR and I want to be part of this team and I'm a decent performer, want to get better, but I want to be that invisible manager, what are some things that I can do to show that I am that invisible manager?
Raise your hand, volunteer for new things, ask questions, be curious, be engaged, not only with your teammates, but also your managers and other departmental counterparts. I got one team member, great example. He proactively started meeting with his sales reps and brainstorming on new ways of finding avenues for pipeline. And we really haven't had enough, I use the term too often probably, but we haven't had enough wood behind the arrow on the channel or the partner sort of avenue of pipeline generation. Yet this one guy just took it upon himself to get with his sales rep and be like, hey, how do you feel about partnering literally with our partners, getting introduced, or at least like, hey, this is me and my sales rep, by our partners into their customer accounts, and me just going nuts and prospecting in there and getting, appointments and opportunities and additional pipeline. The guy basically is setting the mold of how we're going to treat how SDRs are going to approach the partnership world next year. I mean, to a T, to first meeting, to first engagement, to how they prospect, how we tell the partners they're doing the traction they're gaining, keeping them involved when we do actually create new relationships with those partner customer accounts. Like that's a great example of somebody who's actually going beyond the call of duty without being asked, just because they're trying to advance not only themselves, but the team, the awareness, but also bringing in other people to benefit from working together on solving a problem that we haven't even gotten to the bridge to cross it yet. Plus, the good thing is the proactiveness, not only it's going to make him look like an all-star to everybody in the business, but make him that much more valuable and level them up on a partnership level with their sales rep. So we get away from the Batman and Robin, I'm the superhero, you're the sidekick dynamic, and more of like what I like to say, the Han Solo Chewbacca dynamic of like, yeah, I don't speak English, but we're going to help save the galaxy together kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, and I love that, and I think this conversation is really timely because obviously not every SDR can do that. If every SDR on your team raised their hand right now, you probably wouldn't have enough for them to go do it. So it's like, hey, pick and choose. But if I am an SDR and I'm listening to this podcast and maybe I'm a medium performer, but I know I'm of high trust and I want to make sure that I have something outside of my quota attainment to make me valuable to the company, what would you recommend I do tomorrow with my manager to show that I belong being here? And I may not be there attainment-wise where I need to be just yet, but I'm committed to the business, I'm committed to the culture, and I'm committed to the vision.
Great question. I think that before even bringing this up with your manager, I'd say go talk to every single one of your teammates globally if you are a global organization, especially the top performers, because even if you mimic the top performers' process, you're never going to be as good as them because it's their process or their creativity or their brainstorming. Nobody wants to see somebody else ride the coattails of somebody else's good idea. Like the idea is collaborating, understanding, and trying to identify the gaps that are invisible to everybody else. Or like, yeah, that'd be really great if we could just get better pipeline coming out of the partnership world. He's like, I can do that. Like, and make it simple. Don't try to boil the ocean with a lighter, as I like to say. Do it one cup at a time or one spoonful at a time. Have an intelligent conversation. Bring those examples you're identifying to your manager and be like, hey, here's an example. I may be a mid-performer, but I feel like I got more in me. And here's some ideas that I've been talking about with my sales reps. How do we think about that, about strategizing with you, with me, with even my sales reps, all of us together about trying new avenues for us to find pipeline? Where like you're going about it, the expectations of the role, you'll never really be a top performer. You'll always be mid-high kind of thing. Fine. That's part of the reason why I don't ask SDRs to make a certain amount of phone calls every day, unless they're on an improvement plan, because I don't care. Like your path to success is different than mine and different than everybody else's, but it might be an out of bounds path to get back to get on track to those targets. But it's the creativity that each one of us brings that collectively we can all try out. Even go beyond the borders of the organization. I actually went and found a sales trainer in Boston that was probably the most influential, teacher to me personally, but also the team when I ended up managing it back in the day. And I still broadcast what he taught me as an individual contributor and as manager. So it's kind of like, it's anything and everything to get creative. The thing about this, and I think I may have mentioned it in the 10-bound event, people hide behind process and technology.
Yeah.
And people are going new school and they're following the trends of everybody else is doing this, so it has to be the right thing to do. Yet, when was the last time you just made a cold call? When was the last time you sent a handwritten note? When was the last time you're like, hey, I know you're, for instance, for us, for information security, I know you're the chief information security officer. Bear in mind, I'm not in sales. And just throw these curveballs that they don't expect. But let's just get creative and like talk to other people outside of the business. Talk to other SDRs and connect with them on, you even know them. Be like, hey, you have any top 5 easy tips and tricks that you're trying that are creative new ways of finding new appointments and opportunities? Any ways you can partner with, how I can advance myself? I even had one SDR every week for 2 hours go sit down with the customer success team so we could hear what the customers are saying. They're that much more intelligent when you're talking to these people. Like, hey, I know you're not looking to sign up for anything. Bear in mind, I'm not a salesperson. I just want to have a conversation and see if it could be a right fit.
Yeah.
I took that myself as an SDR. wildly successful. Wildly successful. Just because you're creating relationships. So
that's one of my favorite lines.
It's a fuzzy answer, and I apologize, but it's like there is no one thing. There's about 50 silver bullets for that, right?
Yeah.
But you have to go find the bullet, right?
Well, I think you call out something interesting.
Analogies.
It's okay. I'm not opposed to that. It's interesting that you bring up that someone else's process is not going to fit your own, because with all the thought leadership out there, it feels like this is the way to do it. This is the solve. And I think people need to understand it's not the solve. It's an idea. And you could try it.
Right.
But you need to try many different things and find what works. My sales process as an individual contributor was not one thing. I took a little bit from gap selling, took a little bit from Challenger, took a little bit, just a little bit from Spin, and then I implemented Medic as a framework for discovery, and I tinkered with it just a little bit. And that's what I used. But I wasn't all in on one thing. I created what worked for me in the way that I was able to communicate. I would want to educate people, but also uncover that my level of expertise shows them that what they think is a problem is actually a pain. It's a symptom of this bigger problem, which is 10x the revenue loss that you think it is, right? And those were like little things where I'm just a firm believer that you can't just follow one methodology. You got to take a lot of other things, eat the fish, spit out the bones, and make yourself a full meal.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like I use analogies, and one of the things, and it helps communicate universally for anybody listening. And you may not believe me, you may get bored listening because I do talk a lot. I usually have a point. But like in comparison in the art world, let's say you wanted to paint the same way as Picasso. Guarantee you will never be able to recreate his artwork to the exact T that he created in the first place. So that's why I kind of identify with what we do as a true art form. Because there is no textbook to creating new relationships. There is no textbook of how to create a masterpiece of art, right? But the point is we're all trying to get from point A to point B. Your path is going to be a completely different route than my different. The secret is not trying to necessarily find the right path. Over time is recognizing you want to try to shorten the distance between the 2 points, regardless of what the path is. And that's where you start creating kind of the machine or the predictability engine, as I like to call it, that sales development needs to eventually get to, with informed decision-making by leadership, data to use for actionable insights, and getting really creative about how you approach this art form.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense, and I love it. And they're not fuzzy answers, by the way. Good, actionable stuff. I love it. It's cool. Valuable, and I like that you call that out, because it's a good reminder that no one way is going to fit you. It's like that meme where it says expectations and reality, and the expectation is the straight line, and then the reality is the one that's going all over the place, because that's how life is, right? It's not the straight line you think it is. It's going to twist and turn. James, this was awesome. Really appreciate you taking time to share this information and this wisdom with everybody. If we're interested in connecting with you, we'll obviously put some information in the show notes below, but how can people get in contact with you?
You can email me. Either professional email address is james.barton@venafi.com, or personal email address, happy to give it out. It's jb barton23@gmail.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. For those of you interested in engaging with the Sales RX podcast further, or the Sales RX community, we'll have those links in the show notes as well below, and we'll catch you next week on the next episode. Talk to you soon. Thanks, James. What's up, Sales RXers? Thank you for listening to today's episode. We really appreciate you giving us the time in your day to listen to this week's installment, and I hope you found it insightful. That said, I did make a promise at the beginning of the episode that if you stuck all the way through, we would have a special offer for you, and we do. Now listen up, if you're anything like me, you know that social selling is critical to you and your team's success. It's not just enough to cold call and cold email anymore. You have to be doing something different to stand out from the crowd. Now that said, we spend a lot of time here at the Sales Doctor prospecting and social selling on LinkedIn, and it's very challenging. You have to get information to and from your CRM, track LinkedIn conversations, get prospect data. Next thing you know, you're 5 tools deep, and you're spending all your time in this massive cross-reference of data and information. You're stepping on people's toes on different accounts with different contacts. You're messing things up. It's a pain in the butt. That's why I've partnered with Surf. They allow you to float your CRM on top of your prospects' LinkedIn profiles with a bilateral sync of not only activity and information related to your contact, but also they help you find your contact's information directly from LinkedIn. So if I go to a company's page that I'm prospecting and I want to find their head of sales and have a conversation, I don't need to manage a bunch of different tools. I can go exactly to his or her LinkedIn profile. I can add that contact to my CRM directly from LinkedIn, and I can also find their phone number and their email using Surf. The great thing is later on when one of my reps wants to go have a conversation with that head of sales, they can see any activity that I've had, that I'm the owner of the account, the life cycle of the lead or the contact. All the information from the CRM is back on the LinkedIn view. It allows us to sell more effectively and spend more time doing what we want to do, which is having sales conversations. So I partnered with Surf and they're giving a heck of an offer. In the show description, you'll find a link to download a free 14-day trial of their premium version of Surf. This is a tool that companies pay upwards of $400 per year, per rep, per seat, and you get it for free for 2 weeks with 25 email finder credits. That's right. If you go to the link in the show description now and download the free 14-day premium trial of Surf, you will also be given 25 email finder credits as well. This way you can start prospecting and social selling on LinkedIn without having to navigate between multiple tools. So go in the show description, click on the link, download Surf today. Let me know what you think, and we'll see you on next week's episode.